Wonderful. To our audience, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Learning from the Pros, the New Face of B2B Sales and Marketing. I'm your host, Lois Mueller, a B2B strategist at xiQ, and I would love to go over a few housekeeping items before we begin. We'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have a question, please feel free to send it through the Q&A channel at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be answering questions at the end of today's session. Today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session and is accessible through registering on the website. And lastly, we'd encourage you to share this webinar with your social networks. If this is your first time joining us for our webinar series, Learning from the Pros, I'd like to personally welcome you, as well as give you a bit of insight on the series. This webinar, is for fellow B2B visionaries, forward thinkers, and those interested in learning about the future of B2B sales and marketing. The pandemic seemed to catalyze a new set of guidelines for B2B transactions because 80% of customers now prefer digital to in-person sales. So whether you're part of that new statistic or are a member of the 20%, your company will need to innovate marketing methods and continue to evolve your tools and tech to encompass this digital shift. So joining me today to tell us more about the face and future of B2B sellers and marketers is Gerry Murray, who is the Director of Research for Marketing and Sales Technology at IDC, and Usman Sheikh, who is the founder and CEO of xiQ, which is an AI-powered sales and marketing B2B SaaS platform. So gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Perfect. And so Gerry, do you mind kicking things off today or getting things started by telling our audience a bit more about you and what you've been up to at IDC?
Sure. So I am the Director of our Marketing and Sales Technology Research practice at IDC. And we've been looking, really, I think, surfing this transition and multiple transitions, right, from the digital ready to digital first to digital only transitions in marketing and sales in terms of how we interact with our buyers and our prospects. All of the different changes with respect to compliance and privacy and consent, and all of those new set of kind of conditions in which we have to, respect the customer relationship, the data relationship with our customers a little bit more. A lot of challenges in both organizations with getting governance and compliance practices set up, and then also figuring out, well, where do we go from there? Beyond those kinds of things, because compliance is not a really differentiated state for our brand. We've got to go up above and beyond that. And so there's a great deal of change going on. Customer experience has been a huge transformational theme, as a lot of the initiatives have involved multiple departments having to act as one brand, with the individual customer. And, a lot of infrastructure is not really set up to do that very, very effectively. So huge amount of transitions going on all over the place, affecting everything about both organizations.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And then, so with the research that you've done and these transitions that you just spoke of, can you elaborate on what some of the fundamental changes you are noticing or have noticed in the B2B sales and marketing landscape?
Well, B2B marketing in particular, I think, has been probably the most, as an individual day-to-day work process, it's probably the most affected role in the organization, right? Field sales, there's no field sales. Field salespeople are no longer in the field, and that's a huge transition. It presents enormous amount of challenges with respect to getting those folks to be as effective on video and through virtual communications with their clients as they are in person. It's a big lifestyle change for folks who are used to traveling the world and as part of their job, that it's a lifestyle of, can be a kind of a very, it can be a great lifestyle, right? You're seeing the world, going to hotels and going to events and dinners and, tea times and all that kind of stuff with VIP clients, and none of that's happening. So there's been a huge transition there. On the marketing front, I think it's been a big accelerator, the pandemic and the drive to digital first and digital only. It's been a big motivator for marketers to lean in to investment in their marketing, digital marketing capabilities. We've seen a huge transition from investment in application layer stack into the data and analytics layers of the stack. From, I think it's been a big accelerator, the pandemic and the drive to digital first and digital only. It's been a big motivator for marketers to lean in to investment in their marketing, digital marketing capabilities. We've seen a huge transition from investment in application layer stack into the data and analytics layers of the stack. Almost like a 40, I think it was 44% increase over the last 3 years of increase in marketing investment in data and analytics technology. So big transitions going on, and in both organizations. Some of it is operational, some of it is technical, and some of it's frankly cultural and even mindset issues that are coming up to help brands rethink everything that they're doing with respect to customer relationships.
Perfect. And Usman, do you mind giving us some insight on what you feel are some fundamental changes you've noticed as well?
Yeah, so Gerry, absolutely fully agree on the, I think the transition from online to virtual, from in-person to virtual is fairly permanent. The economics are very, very much in favor of doing things online, and the virtual return on investment is extremely high. But I've also noticed that has definitely caused, as you were saying, a disruption in the way people were selling. Traditional B2B companies were going to market, because the in-person, going to those events, meeting those people, making big deals, as we were talking about, every single occasion, and kind of orchestrating them into major events, that's a thing of the past, right? So how do you kind of translate that? And you said there's a whole set of different rules for online, right? So how do you engage and how do you personalize online? So I think that's caused some disruption. I think there are two other things I'd like to highlight, Lois. One is artificial intelligence, the role AI is playing. And as xiQ is a testament, we believe that there's a lot of value in unstructured data that resides outside the enterprise versus the structured data that resides inside the enterprise. And it's really, you need a lot of strong computing capabilities to be able to analyze this and make sense out of it. But if you can distill that and squeeze the juice out of that, it's extremely valuable. And AI is a big game changer in helping you do that. And then, Gerry, I don't know if you're seeing this, but one of the things that we've seen with this kind of new emerging phase of marketing and sales is the convergence of that role, right? That the skill sets and the individuals that are, sellers are moving much more upstream into even demand generation and looking at content creation and how the outreach takes place, how the brand is represented in front of their clients. So they're taking a lot more ownership. And I see that also kind of starting to accelerate as a result of this pandemic, where now you have, absence of field, you have absence of in-person, you have to do more to get faster impact. So I see convergence. Lois, you are actually a living example of this, right? So your field sales, that's actually virtual sales. How about you? What are you seeing?
Well, I understand what you're saying about the in-person events being canceled. You and Gerry both commented on this, and I don't think it's necessarily a thing that's not coming back. I mean, I miss travel. I miss in-person interactions. I miss great dinners and golf outings and ski trips like we were talking about before the webinar started. But so it's not a matter of the in-person events not coming back. It's more about the mental shift that has taken place this last year that I've really noticed. And like I said in the opening of today's session, with that 80% statistic, just because in-person events will come back, does that necessarily mean that's going to be the right approach to your sale? And I think the answer is no. And so I think how companies and individuals need to start focus and shifting, as you said, whether that be AI, it's going to be a pivot in the sales process. So they're going to need to equip themselves with the tools necessary to conduct these virtual interactions and meetings and really engage with their audience in this virtual friendly manner. And so that's one of the fundamental changes. And so I think with the in-person events being canceled, it's now also not so much about networking, but it's about influencing. So it's not who you know, it's what you know. Can you drive change in an online setting? Can you spark that thought leadership? And so I think now education is going to be more prevalent than it ever has been before, especially in regards to the sales process.
Yeah, great. I think interesting on knowing I think what you're suggesting is moving into more of, I see that also, Gerry, that, the last decade has been pretty much about networking, and you've seen the social networking tools kind of platforms taking off. And now increasingly, especially with this focus on digital and how do you stand out in a crowd, I think what Lois is saying is that thought leadership and kind of ownership, domain expertise, and projection of that certainly becomes probably a much more, a better outreach than your traditional techniques that existed. Interesting. Or just kind of reaching out on networks.
I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, one of the things that I've been talking to our practitioners about, kind of going back to my comment about, thinking about how do you go beyond compliance? And sort of the highest level of that is this idea of mentor marketing and just mentoring in general with respect to your customer relationships. It's a completely different mindset, right? At IDC, we have this concept of empathy at scale, this concept of, well, how do we most empathize with our customers so that we understand, their skills and challenges, their aspirations, right? So that we can most effectively serve them. And in a commercial and professional situation, really the most empathetic relationship you can have with someone is to mentor them, right? You have to know a lot about them, but at the same time, you have to really approach the relationship from the point of view of how much value do you represent for that person? How are you going to help them through the first few steps of their current challenges? How are you going to prepare them for the next set of challenges? And how, in the broader sense, are you going to help improve their personal and professional lives in whatever capacity that you can? And I think that's a very big mindset change for marketers, and and in particular, but it applies to salespeople as well. And it goes back to your comment about, well, how do we demonstrate right up front before you buy anything from us that we have a lot more to offer you as a customer than just products and services, right? We've got a lot of expertise. We've got, we can, if I'm a consumer brand, maybe I can help you connect with other communities and local events or all kinds of other skills and things that, might be of interest to you, books and areas of interest that are related to kind of the lifestyle that we represent. And if I'm B2B, how do I deliver a whole bunch of process level expertise? If I'm delivering automation solutions, how do I deliver a whole bunch of expertise on managing your type of business better based on everything we've learned from all other customers like you? And the more you can put that front of brand, the more you can deliver that value into the relationship up front. It creates a much deeper relationship with the customer, not only the account, but the actual individual, so that, whether they move in and up or out and up in their career, they're going to be very likely to take you along with them. And, obviously doing that requires a lot of automation because everybody's got their different challenges and skills and aspirations. And, going back to the AI comment, we're going to have to rely on a lot of machine assistance to help connect all that internal and external content that we want to curate for our customers and deliver as a value add over and above product and service.
Okay, so you are using AI in the role of empathizing at scale, is that right?
So, yeah, well, I think AI is an integral part of that process, right? You can't do empathy at scale without automation and without automated decision making, right? So you've got to have AI capabilities in the background in order to assess the content inventories and that you have to offer and match it to the individual circumstances of every customer. And there's just simply no way to do that at scale without the assistance of AI.
Yeah, so Gerry, that's kind of cool because I think AI is a learnable trait. It's not just a natural instinct. It's something that people can learn. And I think there's two parts to that, to building empathy. One is having the understanding of the person and the ability to kind of communicate with them at a wavelength that they can communicate with you at. And the other is context, establishing context. In order to establish context, why are you talking to them? What is it that value that you bring? You've got to do research. And both those today with the help of tools like AI, are learnable. As a matter of fact, we've kind of, our motto for xiQ is use of AI to humanize B2B. And that's exactly that, we've taken the idea of how do you build empathy, the basic core concept, which is that you need to be able to connect and communicate. And in order to do that, you need to be conversant in what and contextual in what you're communicating about. And both those things today, we can use AI to actually help us bring, both those to the seller and to the person who's engaging. So AI is, from our perspective, a big change agent in helping humanize that sales and marketing relationship at scale, right?
Exactly right.
Usman,
Yeah.
apologies, Gerry. Usman, you use a really great analogy when we are speaking with clients, and that in today's selling and marketing landscape, it's as if you're at a party and someone just turned all the lights off.
Yeah.
And so unless if you have AI acting as your night goggles, how do you really navigate, and how do you still get that sale, and how do you still get to know someone? And so I think having automated or augmented intelligence in your pocket for empathizing for the sales cycle is really going to be necessary moving forward.
Yeah, Gerry, the idea is that, with pandemic and post-pandemic, the ability to meet people and kind of judge the signals that we could pick up when we met in person have disappeared. And in that absence, those people, I like the example that Lois is citing, the lights suddenly went off and only those with night vision goggles could see who was around and can succeed. And today, the equivalent of night vision goggles in our analogy and in our paradigm is the use of artificial intelligence to help us shine light and put context on individuals and events that can be useful and very purposeful for my objective of being able to sell. Right? So we see that as a big game changer in the context of AI. Gerry, maybe you can add, what else are you seeing out there? What other aspects of AI are you experiencing?
Well, I know it's interesting. We're seeing an expansive number of use cases for AI across marketing and sales. Particularly in sales, we see a lot of constant scoring, real-time updating in terms of account and opportunity scoring, and prioritizing the sales team's focus on deals that are more likely, relatively speaking, to close faster and bigger. We see a lot of help with respect to on digital now. All of these sales calls can be recorded. So, we're seeing a treasure trove of information of the DNA of the sales conversation coming out, and the ability to analyze that. That's another, big set of use cases that I think, will help first line sales managers and sales reps, really ramp up and in terms of their onboarding and help them, keep track of what kind of trends and issues are coming up in various different customer conversations, and what kind of competitors are being mentioned by what kinds of customers, and how do we best respond to those kinds of things. A big trend with respect to the whole conversational selling and that area. And then I think you're right that going back to that whole concept of how do we really practice expansive curation with respect to our customers? How do we expand their understanding of the problem they're trying to solve today, the next problems that are going to encounter, and the larger issues around managing their career, advancing their business objectives, growing their business in general. And how do we deliver more and more education and IP into the relationship, as marketers and sellers, over and above the products and services we're trying to sell? Because I think customer expectations are changing greatly in many different dimensions, and one of which is they really don't want to be sold to, right? They want value. They want the brands that can be partners, both in terms of personal and professional lives, but in particular in B2B, that all that over the top value is what, obviously the product's got to deliver, but then on top of that, in order for the customer to really perceive you as a trusted advisor and to really depend on you for insights and see you as a source of knowledge that's advancing their understanding of where they're going in their whatever job, whatever role they are in whatever sort of a business. That's really where the true bonding comes in, the real reliance and dependence, and that's a customer that you're more likely to have for life. They're going to take you with them.
Yeah, and I think I go back to Gerry, what I was saying earlier. The value of information in the unstructured public world, public domain world, right? So, for example, we can, predict the personality type and buying behavior based on the digital breadcrumbs individuals have left in the public domain, and those can become really good tools at scale of driving empathy. Likewise, we can purpose the extended internet and find information that can serve as alerts to sellers and marketeers as to when and what to react to events within their clients and prospects. And this kind of feeds into that real-time enterprise. Time is of essence. Being at the right place at the right time is super important. And again, if we're looking at velocity and strike distance to being able to make contact, then you have to have tools like artificial intelligence that can actually accelerate that and provide better insights into decision making. Simple as that, right? So with that, Lois, if you don't mind just going to the next slide, Gerry and Lois, let me ask you that. So we've talked about everything moving to virtual and everything kind of AI playing a major role. What are you guys seeing in terms of new set of skills? What do I, as a seller or a B2B marketeer, how do I need to change my game, Gerry, for example, to be able to survive and thrive within this new environment? What would you say are kind of the big game changers in terms of skill sets for sellers?
Yeah, so there's a lot of challenges with respect to the transition to video and virtual selling, and particularly for field reps and kind of a top flight sales team that's out in the world, coming back and sort of having a kind of an inside sales high volume sales kind of lifestyle at home. That's a big transition. There's a big cultural transition there. There's a big just day-to-day work process transition there. And so that's been a big challenge for a lot of organizations. And then in terms of the skills with respect to understanding a little bit more about how to best use data, right? And to have better insight into, even if you're only selling to a couple of very large accounts, typically, you have tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of employees in these accounts, and using new tools to help you understand how all the different decision makers in the business might be connected, how you might use the success in one area to move into relationships with other business units. There's a lot of investigative work and value that AI can, as you suggest, you can pick up signals out in the world and help understand what the professional connections are between different people in the account. So it can help drive account penetration and help you get more value, more share of wallet out of the account, depending on what kind of products you're selling. So there's a lot of new skills that the sales organizations have got to acquire in order to thrive in this world where we can't use that interpersonal charisma. We can't use the body language signals that we're getting in live and in person. We have to rely a little more so on data and signaling, and we've got to understand that we're competing against other brands that are developing these capabilities, possibly ahead of us. So, there's a certain amount of urgency here to making sure that we have these capabilities and that every salesperson sees the value in utilizing these new tools. And that can be a real challenge because sales in particular is an organization that has a kind of a bit of a mixed relationship with technology. In particular, their CRM packages have kind of notoriously been used as kind of productivity measures as opposed to actual customer relationship management tools. And I think we finally started to layer in the AI that ultimately fulfills the promise to the rep that, yeah, this tool is going to actually help you manage the relationship with the customer, as opposed to something that's going to, just be used as some sort of assessment tool for your performance. And that there's a good motivation for sales teams to be much more cognizant and of the quality of data that they put in to those systems, and that they have AI assistants to actually help them do that. That the AI can now actually do some of the data entry, do some of the call reporting for them. So there's a whole plethora of tools to solve a number of different challenges that sales teams have working virtually at scale. And they've really got to be able to master, all of them.
Yeah, Gerry, I think you're absolutely right in that sellers now have to put themselves back in kind of that student role. They have to be very comfortable with learning and adapting. Because the biggest challenge or what's happening is that how do you appear or become user-friendly in a virtual landscape? So how do you get to know someone without having that interpersonal reaction? And how do you invite them to get to know you? And so I think some building blocks of the success of that is going to be to stay organized, because no longer can you just go by your social calendar to close these deals. And again, it's not who you know now, but what you know. So I think organization, diligence, the research that you said is now coming in with these deals, looking at the data, looking at the analytics to tell you who and what company to focus on. All of that, again, is in that student mentality. And so I think sales reps now have to be willing to educate themselves and relearn a process that in this last year, because of the pandemic, has really been knocked on its side. Again, just because travel will come back in live person events, is that really going to be the successful approach to closing a deal? And I think the answer is no. So I think diligence, education, and then again, that trustworthiness in this virtual environment is going to be huge. Do what you say you're going to do, be where you say you're going to be, and really be present virtually, if that's possible.
Present, ever present almost.
Yeah.
I fully agree. I think, what I picked, Gerry, was that you made a really, I think, very insightful distinction, because customer relationship systems being performance management systems rather than, 30 years later now, that dream is starting to come true.
Yeah.
What the word relationship is starting to actually materialize.
Right.
That's really, really interesting, actually. Yeah. And I think that, coming back to the skills question, I fully agree. I think that the learning part is a really big part. We've got to change. However, I also see this, we work with a lot of young professional sales students in universities. And some of the universities are doing an excellent job in preparing the future sellers. They're introducing tools like ours. They are getting them really equipped to be able to function in a virtual environment, and really conversational AI coming in. They're starting to give them, really pack the house with some really interesting ways. And I think the skills will materialize. I think there will be the diligence skills, the research skills, the presentation skills, and the marketing skills. This is what I keep noticing over and over, is that the next generation of sellers in terms of skills, the salespeople have, or the marketing people have more sales skills, or the salespeople have more marketing skills, and that convergence is very strong. And I think that somebody who can work in this hybrid role is really, I think that's the future. It's that hybrid role between sales and marketing. That's what I see starting to emerge.
Yeah, I think that hybrid idea is a good one. And hopefully for most organizations, it also implies that there needs to be a lot more coordination and connection between the marketing and sales teams and all the systems and that generate information about customers. Because we need to have a very seamless experience for the customer. If we move to digital first and digital only, one of the other implications for that, in spite of its impact on in addition to its impact on the field sales organization, is that customers are actually spending less time talking to sales, right? They're doing more and more of the discovery and education work online or through digital sources. And as a result, when they get to the point of having that conversation with the salesperson, that's got to be really on point. The salesperson has got to really understand, okay, is this a customer who's got no familiarity with our products and service, or has never implemented or bought something like this before? Are they very familiar? Have they done this 3 or 4 times in the past? And what are they looking for? What kind of use case? What kind of industry and use cases are they most interested in? What's their role in the decision-making process? All those issues, all those questions about who am I talking to? I've got to know that right up front. I don't want to go back to, page 1 of our product and company story after the customer's done all that work online. So in addition to sales being able to do a little bit more outreach in a marketing sense and marketing facilitating the qualification of the sales leads, the salespeople have also got to be able to be right on point. It's got to be a seamless process and handoff between the 2 organizations, and as the customer goes along, and all the other contacts at the front office. So there's been a lot of very interesting implications for that, particularly with respect to technology, helping all of these different applications and interactions connect with each other.
Gerry, you say that, but here's I come from an enterprise world. I've been 25 years frontline B2B. Big enterprise, SAP, and so on. And what I think is super frustrating is the fragmented tech layer. To complete an end-to-end from prospecting to close deal cycle today, on average, you have to go through 16 different technologies, right? That means there's an overabundance of my marketing program spent being diverted towards IT spend to manage the integration. That's one. Second thing is, so that's just a hurdle, the people are trying to get there, but there are the silos between the technologies are preventing the sales and marketing teams from getting closer. They've actually started, they're kind of counterweighing each other. It's counterproductive. And so even though they want to converge, this is a challenge. And then the second option is that you take these different 16 silos solutions and put a unifying layer. And again, that kind of depreciates. I think one of the opportunities that this transformation, this kind of partially catalyzed digital transformation, has to be a rethink and a consolidation of their tech stack. There's too much money is being spent over there, too much time is being lost over there, too much, frankly, relatively irrelevant data or historic data is residing. I don't want to kind of diminish the value of historic data. There's a lot of historic data. But I, more importantly, want to know what's today, what's happening today. Where is my customer? Who is my customer? How do they think? What is influencing them? What are their competitive pressures? What are their personal motivations, right? I need to focus on that. And the tools are there, but I can't get that information from what I have in my toolkit right now. That toolkit is fairly non-compliant toolkit. It's got different standards for each other. So I think that's kind of a big challenge right now.
Yeah, I think I've made this comment and observation a couple of times that if we had only built this front office infrastructure from the data layer up, it would be a much more coordinated, holistic kind of system as opposed to this fragmented set of departmental solutions. But here we are. As you said, it's going to be a series of step changes for a lot of organizations. 2020 accelerated that a great deal for a lot of front office and customer interaction type of solutions. I think I agree with you. There is a big transition going on, as I mentioned earlier. The transition of the investment towards the data and analytics layer, and using that as the connective tissue between all of these applications. We're not going to. Yes, there may be 16 different systems, but nobody's going to rip and replace them all. It's going to take 10 years. Even if people do want to rip and replace them all, it's going to take 10 years to do all of that. So in the meantime, we need to make sure that the customer's data keeps up with them as they move around in different points of interaction in our business, marketing, sales, commerce, billing, support, services, fulfillment, whatever. And they're bouncing around all over the place, both B2B and B2C, and kind of different ideas. But in B2B, it's particularly difficult because you want to track account activity, right? So you might have dozens of people from a given account interacting in marketing and with billing and with customer support or services implementation or field support, field service. They could have all these interactions going on simultaneously, and it's really difficult to keep track of all the activity that other departments around the business are having with the same account. And that can, that just makes it more difficult to act as one brand, with respect to the customer. I think just a finer point on this whole skills thing, in addition to the obvious, video virtual selling stuff, there's also this challenge of going more towards a value-based, selling motion or value-based relationship with the customer, and making that more than just a pre-sales kind of, part of the relationship that we. Sales makes a value promise to the customer, sales and marketing do during the acquisition process. And then downstream, functions in the business have to fulfill that promise. And we want to connect all of them, right? We want to make sure that everybody understands, the value promise that's been made to the customer, the outcomes that the customer is expecting, and all the various details that accompany those objectives. And that we pass them along throughout the course of the relationship with the customer, and that we actually measure that so that we can see going forward if we're ahead of the game in terms of accelerated adoption, we're ahead of project schedule or whatever, the benefits are already starting to roll in. There's opportunities to then start to expand, kind of sell additional upsell and cross-sell activities might kick in for marketing. If we find ourselves behind, then we've got to intervene in the account and see what can we do either on either side of or both sides of the relationship to course correct. So that's another big challenge for companies, and it has a lot to do with this cross-departmental collaboration and coordination between the acquisition functions in the business, customer acquisition functions in the business, and those that are charged with fulfilling that promise that the sales team has made.
Yeah. Cool.
And so on that note, Gerry, you double clicked on the skills required for B2B sales and marketers, but what do you feel is the new face of B2B selling and marketing?
Yeah, the new face of B2B marketing and selling, I think, is this whole transition, this mindset of value delivery, and this idea of that there's a concept of the mentoring idea, the mentoring mindset with respect to customer relationships that should permeate everything. It should be a really cultural idea throughout all the folks who in a business that interact with the customer, that you're learning about them, but at the same time, every business is in a unique position at the center of their customer universe, and they need to leverage that for the benefit of all the other customers, right? So I think that's particularly in the marketing function, that's a big mindset change, right? That it's not just about volume, it's also about value delivery. It's not just about messaging, it's about mentoring. It's not just about data ownership, it's about data stewardship. There's a lot of transitions there going on for marketers, just in terms of adopting to this new world of regulatory compliance and the cultural gestalt that has changed behind the scenes, right? The legislation is there because there's been big societal and cultural uproar around some of the data practices that were available to marketers in the past. And on the sales side, again, I think it's really about that concept of how do we deliver value and how do we sustain that throughout the course of the whole relationship with the customer, right? And that value can take many different forms. We've talked about curating content delivery and expanding the customer's understanding of their current challenges, processes that they're trying to run, teams that they're trying to run, whatever they're trying to accomplish in their role in the business of this in that moment in the opportunity context. Well, we probably know lots of other customers who've been through that, and how can we deliver not just the product and services, but as much other education and resourcing that we can, and to make our brand make that part of our brand impression with the customer, that we have enormous amount of knowledge to deliver into the account, and we are actually investing in the individual's skills and competencies that will not only enable them to resolve and meet the challenges of today, but prepare them for those of the future. And I think if we take that approach, that has, some big implications for, our practice of selling, some of the ways we might measure the success of our engagements and relationships with our customers, and ways in which we might gain some insight into our customer base. One of the interesting things about delivering competencies into your customer base is that you can actually see how many resources, at what level of competency your customers have to solve the problems that you're working on with them. If they've got low level, very few low level resources, well, we've got to market, more services. Maybe we need to bring in partners and so we can expand the skill set that's needed to solve this problem for the customer. Or if they're very high level, very deep set of resources and skills and competencies, we have a very different approach, that we might take to manage that account. And maybe it's a question of how we don't need to help them directly, but now we need to leverage their success to other parts of the business. And so there's lots of ways in which those insights can be used to enhance the customer relationships and make the relationship more profitable for both the customer and the vendor.
Yeah, Gerry, I'd like to double click on that. I come from the SAP world where value-based selling is kind of the core part of their DNA. I mean, they've really, really gone deep into this, and we're kind of trained day in and day out on the idea of value. And you talked about the mindset, the value mindset, I kind of break it down in terms of going back to our skills question or traits question. What are some of the key traits? And I break kind of the new face, Lois, because your question was, what is the new face? I break this into two parts. I say one is the conventional wisdom, right? The learnings of the past. Everything that worked in sales for all the centuries that has worked still holds true, right? The due diligence holds true, the patience to follow up, the persistence, these key traits, get to know your customer, and then understanding that people buy from people and people they trust is conventional wisdom that will always be there, right? However, there are some new skills that are also required. This out of the box thinking, this convergence, the value selling, the value selling is not just in silos. It's across the board. It's a relationship. You're selling multiple layers. Yesterday I posted this Maslow's hierarchy pyramid. If you can believe those things still exist, but actually a company did a really nice pyramid showing the B2B elements of value, right? And so what are basic values? And there's almost like 45 different, check boxes that you have to go up that Maslow's value pyramid to get that done. And that's a lot. And again, that's where tools, AI can come in and help you to come together. But, with that said, and the fact that we're virtual, Gerry, I think that there's the demographics of the person that sells, the B2B seller, is going to change. It's going to go to people that are that research diligent oriented, probably could not, these could be people that were solution engineers or engineers who really didn't want to go into customer facing roles, but really know the value proposition, right? And now sitting in the comfort of their home, they can project and they can drive these things virtually, right? So I think that the type of person entering the field and thriving and succeeding, I've heard from a lot of B2B salespeople, all my career I've been sitting across a table from somebody and I can't do that, right? So that's a big shift. And then there's this whole new set of people that are coming into the market. That's the life they lead, right? So I think there's going to be a difference in type of the people. Maybe even the gender could be affected, right? In terms of who comes in and who is more diligent, right? Who has more empathy, who can develop that EQ, who can build those relationships, who can establish those persistence, right? Those values and those skills and traits will become much more prominent because again, we're in that dark room and we need all those little tools and techniques to help us build those night vision goggles so we can start looking at these in a scalable way.
Right. I don't feel it's just the hybrid work environment that's becoming a mainstream movement. I think it's the role itself that a seller now has to also be very involved with marketing, and it's that hybrid as well. So I know there was the introduction of the CRO position earlier that's blending sales and marketing, and that's trickling down. So as an account executive, I'm also doing marketing strategies and focusing on that. And so I think that's going to be the new face, is that hybrid role. And then again, I think we're going to hear a lot of new voices come to light over the next few years as well, because Usman, as you said, it's really broadened the mentor market, and it's giving people an opportunity that in the past didn't have the ability to travel, didn't have the ability to be client facing, but now they're given a voice. So I think we're going to see a lot of really great material from different point of views and aspects that we haven't in the past. And it's really going to focus on the nurture of the sale versus closing the deal. Because I think people really want to know that they're being well taken care of, not just that they have a buddy in the company.
Fully agree. I think we're almost out of time, but Gerry, first of all, extremely grateful that you joined us today. So thank you very much. However, before you take off, I think there might be a couple of questions online that if you can spend a couple of more minutes, we can just address a few questions. Go ahead, please.
Yes, of course. So everyone, the floor is open for questions if you have additional. As Usman said, we did have a few come through the chat. And so Gerry, it looks like this first one is to you specifically. It says, with your knowledge as a research director at IDC, specifically in marketing and sales tech, what would you say is the biggest evolution happening in tech other than AI?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, there's a lot of activity going on with respect to this idea that all of these systems have to act as one, right? The idea of marketing has expanded from a departmental function to this concept of customer experience. Like, okay, that is an end-to-end horizontal process that affects every front office function and all of the supporting processes in the enterprise that make those things happen. So there's been a kind of a big refactoring, re-architecting of enterprise architecture, right? So we're starting to see an old world where, particularly in marketing, right? We spent a decade where all the investment and innovation was at the application layer, and every application was kind of its own stack. It had the data and analytics and the reporting and the dashboarding and the scheduling, and all that stuff was baked into everything because each application kind of had to stand on its own. Now, a decade later, we've got dozens of marketing apps, dozens of sales apps, and elsewhere in the organization. And now we're realizing, well, the only way to connect those things is start to take some of those things out of those applications and provide them as enterprise services. So I think one of the big transitions that's happening is very related to AI, but it's this whole concept of creating customer data as an enterprise service. How do we get all the customer data sorted out? How do we deal with the transactional structured stuff? How do we deal with the internal real-time session-related behavioral data? How do we deal with all the external data feeds? And how do we get that into a structured resource for the enterprise so that every application that's talking to those customers has the ability to publish and subscribe, or leverage the collective learning and information we're gathering about these customers. So that's a really big challenge for large organizations. Small and medium-sized companies have much simpler infrastructure, and so they can probably get through that process a little faster. Large enterprise, as we were just talking about earlier, alluding to, dozens of mission critical applications across the business. It's going to take a decade to transition all of those things and help them be much more connected, the sort of connected cloud architecture that we're moving into right now. So that's a huge piece of the kind of enterprise digital transformation challenge.
I have one question. Sorry, Lois, and if you can just, Gerry, ask, and I've got a kind of bit of a killer question for you. So AI, there's a lot of fear in terms of what AI will replace, or how much of the sales and marketing process and jobs and roles will AI replace? Do you think that an AI bot could be running the cycle in the future?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. I think we're going to go through a long evolution with AI. It's going to evolve for decades and decades in the future, and who knows, what capabilities will emerge. In the short term, I think, however, it's going to, as we alluded to earlier, is an expansive set of use cases that it's being applied to, and it's becoming more common. And I think everybody who works in in a job that is going to be touched by AI, it's got to start to think about, well, how much of this job can be delegated to AI? Hopefully it's a lot of the tedious, repetitive stuff, because that's really what AI is good at. And that's the kind of thing that is kind of bogs down a lot of people on their jobs, and particularly for sales teams, like just doing call reports. Okay, well, I've got to sit down at the end of every day, or Friday nights or over the weekend, and type up all my call reports. Well, if they're being recorded and transcribed and then tagged and analyzed by AI, and AI can actually do some of the follow-up work, it can put all the data into the CRM or backend database. It can actually start scheduling for me, like, who's the next person I need to meet with in terms of building consensus and getting towards a decision with this account, and how can I add products, change pricing, and all that kind of stuff. The AI is starting to be able to assist with all of that kind of activity. And that's the stuff that just bogs the sales team down. So on the one hand, I think that's going to be a great benefit for everybody in pretty much any role. A lot of the tedious, repetitive, volume-based stuff that we have to do over and over again should get automated out of our work process. And we may find ourselves not only working, having bots, managing those bots, but we may actually, almost be collaborating with them in some ways. And we may find that those bots are, being deployed all the way up and down, the organizational hierarchy, and that we are, in some way, shape, or form working with, working and managing some form of, AI capability. And it's going to be really interesting. I think there's, particularly as the conversational capabilities of AI, become much more pervasive. That's like the ultimate natural user interface. So if we were able to, use conversation and talking to our systems, or some sort of intuitive, even this text-based dialogue with the AI agents, it will become much more pervasive, become much more intuitive, and not scary. It'll be something that, parts of our jobs will be automated, as parts of almost all jobs. That's the job of automation, is to find, parts of jobs that we want to, delegate to, a machine. But I don't think it means that, it's going to, destroy whole job categories. Certainly not in the short term.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I've got AI always kind of eavesdropping on me. Siri comes in, tells me what I need to do. Alexa tells me something different. I talk to my TV, I talk to my car. One last question. I think this is targeted towards you, Lois. What, as an ABM strategist, what are your three recommendations to build an ABM strategy? So slightly different, but if you can give us your 3 key recommendations for building an ABM strategy.
Absolutely. Great question, by the way, thank you. When it comes to breaking into an account and focusing on ABM, I think 3 top things I would recommend is really understanding who your decision makers are, and better yet, how they make their buying decisions. So you need to understand your buyer. Not only that, but you need to understand the account and your target inside and out. So that would be, again, doing that research, doing that due diligence, like we talked about earlier in this webinar, about the most relevant news that's happening in the company, mergers and acquisitions, or even where they're at in their fiscal year. What talking points can you use to engage with them? And again, how can you keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening inside the company? Because again, today's buyer is very sophisticated and very well versed. And so you need to be educated and you need to know exactly what's happening so that you best are the person to, as Gerry said, be that thought advisor, be that trusted advisor and the gatekeeper of their account. And lastly, I'd say you also need to well verse yourself in what's happening in the world of your target company's competitors. Keep your finger again on the pulse of what's happening in those other worlds and divisions. So again, you know where changes are taking place and you know how best to strategize and break into that account. So I'd say those 3 things: understand your buyer, understand your account, and then also know what's happening in the world of their competitors.
Yeah, Gerry, quickly on that. Are you seeing ABM as a successful tool and a methodology? Is it something that's taking root? Will it be here? Is it a passing trend?
No, I think I think companies are taking multiple approaches to account-based marketing. It's account-based selling. That's sales. Like that's sort of the exact. That's how sales sees the whole world. It's kind of a new perspective for marketers. But in general, I'd say ABM strategies or programs. There's kind of multiple levels of them. The highest level is when you have marketing embedded into the sales team. There's a budget, bespoke budget for the account, or possibly even for the opportunity. I mean, if you're selling, 7 and 8 figure opportunities, there might actually be marketing budgets specific to those, and you build all the resources, any kind of web or application or all the collateral, and the whole pitch is really designed around the opportunity, because it's a big opportunity that's a strategic, imperative for the company, both the buyer and the seller. And so then there's multiple levels of, below that, where, marketing is more of a kind of support role to certain sales teams, and there might be certain qualifications with respect to which kinds of accounts, which kind of opportunities are going to get how much marketing support, kind of bespoke resources. And then there's just sort of the basic kind of lower level account-based marketing idea that's really just stuck in marketing. And it's, basically kind of scraping IP addresses and making sure when somebody from the healthcare industry comes to your website, they see a healthcare, related landing page and content, as opposed to someone who comes from financial services. They're seeing, more of a financial, so things that are really highly relevant to their role and their industry, and anything else you might know about them with respect to the use cases or products that they seem to be most interested in. So there's like a spectrum, if you will, of ways in which you can execute account-based marketing, and it really has to do with the nature of the business and the level of, if you're a company that sells very few very big deals, you want to be more on the high end, where there's bespoke marketing resources and budgets and collateral being delivered into those opportunities. If you're selling lower price, lower margin stuff at scale, you've got to kind of default back to the other end of the spectrum, where a lot of it's just kind of digital marketing related customizations for specific industries. So wide range of approaches, and it really depends on the business model in which it's being deployed.
Beautiful, great answer. Thanks a lot. I actually learned a lot from that particular answer. So again, I think we've run out of time. Gerry, thank you so very much for coming here and being with us today and with our audience. And Lois, I'll hand it to you to maybe just close it out.
Of course. So thank you everyone for joining us. As Usman said, that's all the time we have for today. You'll receive a recording of this session in your mailboxes within 48 hours. And if you have questions or want to learn more about xiQ, you can log on to our website, xiqinc.com, and schedule a free consultation with us. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.